Now that we've completed questions 1, 2, and 3 of the 2023 CSEC Food and Nutrition past paper, we're going to move on to the remaining questions. So let's take a look at question 4. Question 4a is asking us to state 2 causes of food spoilage. Now, of course, there are more than 2 answers, so if you select any of the 2 from the responses shown here, then you would have received your full marks. So some of the causes would include improper storage, warm temperature, enzymatic action, unhygienic surroundings, poor food handling, and in this case it could be cross-contamination. And then the final one is moisture. Differentiate between the following methods of preservation. And the 2 methods they would have given us: drying or dehydration, and treatment with chemical preservatives. As the question suggested, it's asking you to state the difference between the 2 methods of preservation. So you would respond by saying that dehydration is a method of preservation that extracts moisture from food, thereby inhibiting the growth of microorganisms, while chemical preservation involves adding ingredients such as food additives to prevent or retard food spoilage, extend shelf life, and preserve the nutritive value. You'll notice that this is a 2-part question. So as a follow-up to the question that we previously answered, it is now asking us to name 1 food item that is preserved by each method. So for dehydration, some food items would include powdered milk, grapes, papaya, pineapples can even be an example, saltfish, and some meat products are also dehydrated as well. As it relates to treatment with chemical preservatives, food items such as baked goods, processed cheese, cured meats, and pickles would fall under this category. This next question is worth all of 6 marks. And that is because it is asking you to do some sort of explanation. So the question says, explain 3 different changes that may occur when heat is applied to cereals. Now the 3 that I would have identified here is gelatinization, dextrinization, and change in nutritive value. So for the first one, gelatinization, it says that cereals contain starch, which we already know. When cereals are cooked in boiling water, the starch grains absorb the water, swell, and burst and forms a paste. This contributes to the characteristic textures of cooked cereals, for example, oatmeal. The second one is dextrinization, and it goes on to say that when dry heat is applied, the starches within the cereals are broken down into sugars called dextrin. This process gives the food a golden brown color, as well as it enhances the flavor. For example, when bread is toasted or when flour is browned for gravies. And then the third one, change in nutritive value. When heat is applied to cereals, the nutrient content may change. As you know, certain vitamins such as vitamin C are sensitive to heat, as well as the minerals potassium and magnesium, which may also be reduced during cooking. Last question for question 4, explain 2 ways in which air is incorporated into a batter. So I've given you 3 ways here. You would of course select 2, or if you have any others, you may add to it as well. So the first one is by using the creaming method. And if you've ever baked cakes or any form of baked product using the creaming method, you'd already know what this is. So it involves beating a fat, usually butter, together with sugar to create pockets of air that are trapped in the butter around each sugar granule. When cooked, the trapped air expands, causing the product to rise. The second way is by sifting dry ingredients together or by sifting flour. During sifting, air is incorporated into the dry ingredients, thus helping to lighten the mixture. And then the third one, beating the batter. So the beating movement incorporates air so that when the product is heated, the entrapped air bubbles expand, causing the product to increase greatly in size. Alright, now successfully explaining those 2 ways would have given you 4 marks in total. Moving on to question 5. So the first question is worth 3 marks and it is asking us to list 3 factors to be considered when purchasing a stove or a cooker. So some of the factors that I would have listed here is the first one, type of stove. Of course, you want to consider, is the type of stove that you're going to purchase going to be economical? What type of fuel are you going to be using? What style of stove do you prefer? The second factor to consider would be the size of the stove, because you wouldn't want it to be a situation where you purchase an extremely large stove and then the space that you have allocated in your kitchen for that stove cannot facilitate it. Or you may not want to purchase a large stove if you have a small family or if you're not going to be cooking large quantities of food at a time. Third, you want to consider the safety features of the stove as well. And this is because you want to make a purchase that is going to be safe for use, as well as you want to ensure that the stove can eliminate any potential risks. And then number 4, you'd want to consider the construction material because, of course, if you're going to be purchasing an appliance, you want to ensure that it is going to be something that is durable or can withstand use over time. All right, next question. List 3 ways to conserve energy when using an electric cooker. In other words, when using an electric stove. So the first one that I have listed here is to use the right sized pots and pans. And this is because if you use a pan or a pot that is smaller than the actual burner, what will happen is that the energy will be wasted. And this is because heat will be dispersed beyond the pot. So you want to ensure that you use the correct size for the correct burners. Number 2, use lids on pots and pans, and this is because once you cover a pan or a pot with a lid, it traps the heat on the inside and thus cooks food faster. Next one, avoid opening the oven door unnecessarily. We all know that when you open the oven door consistently, it allows cool air to enter into the oven and sometimes that drops the temperature. Number 4, turn off the oven or burner a few minutes before food is finished cooking, and what will happen is the residual heat will continue to cook the food even after the burner has been turned off. And then number 5, cook multiple dishes together. Pretty self-explanatory. If you cook multiple items at a time, you can save on fuel. Moving on to the next question. So it says, use the illustration to identify 3 types of accidents that may occur in the kitchen and state 1 example of each type of accident. Now, just by looking at the picture, you can identify so many faults or so many things that can go wrong in this one image. Now, the types of accidents that I would have identified here is electrocution, burns and scalds, fire, and slips and falls. All right, so remember we have to provide an example for each accident that we would have identified. So for electrocution, I would have identified that the appliances are still plugged in and they're close to spill the liquid that is on the floor. All right, so for the next type of accident, which is burns and scalds, I've identified at least 3 possible outcomes of this. So for the first one, child number 1, he's playing with matches in the corner. He can actually burn himself with the said matches that he's playing with. Child number 2, she's reaching for the handle of the pot that's on the stove. Now imagine if the handle of that pot is hot. It can burn her hand. And then for the third child, he's pulling on the tablecloth. And as you see on the table, there's a teapot and a cup and saucer. Now I'm assuming that it has hot liquid or tea or whatever the case is. It can spill, burn the child on his hand, on his head, whatever the case may be. For the next accident, which is fire, if you notice, there's a kitchen towel that's hanging over an exposed flame at the stove or the cooker. So that could cause an accident if it happens to fall on the open flame. And then for the final one, slips and fall, I have that children may trip over electric cords. The worker may fall from the stool. If you realize there's an electric cord that's wrapped around one of the legs of the stool that she's standing on. She could also fall on the skateboard or slip on the skateboard when she's coming down. Another one that is not listed here, but one of the children may just run across the kitchen and slip from the liquid that's on the floor. And just as simple as that, you would have received 6 marks. So that would be 3 marks for the type of accident identified and then 3 marks for each example that you would have provided. Alright, the next question says that Jenny is responsible for making 300 tea plates for a function. Explain 2 ways in which Jenny may achieve efficiency in the kitchen. And I've given you 3 ways. So firstly, she can create a time plan. Now, what the time plan does is it reduces stress and anxiety, and this will allow her to ensure that each task is done in a timely manner. Think about when you are creating your time plan for your practicals or for your SB assignments. It would be similar to that. The second one, using labor-saving tools and equipment. So of course, Jenny could use tools and equipment that will complete tasks much faster. For example, ingredients may be chopped or shredded using a food processor. And then number 3, organize the kitchen or workspace. Now, Jenny could simply organize the kitchen ahead of time to ensure that she knows exactly where her ingredients and her tools are. So she would keep the tools, the equipment, the ingredients to be used close by in order to reduce reaching time and hence the unnecessary time will be directly cut. So instead of wondering where everything is, instead of leaving her workstation every 10 seconds, she would have everything at her disposal, ready to use. And just like that, we are at question number 6. Question 6A. State 3 reasons for cooking food. Of course, we cook food because we want to destroy any harmful microorganisms. We want to preserve the food. We want to make sure that the food is easier to digest, or you want to improve flavor and the texture of the food. Some persons may also cook food as a hobby or for profession. Any of those 3 would have given you 3 marks. Alright, we're moving on to the cow that broke the CSEC internet. Now this question is asking you to look at the diagram and to label the sections identified. So it would have asked us to label part A, part C, and part E. So for part A, that section is known as the chuck. For part C, that's the short loin, and then section E is known as the round. Now, just for information purposes, let's say that you were asked to label all of the sections of the cuts of beef. The remaining ones for B, that would be the rib. For D, that is the sirloin. For G, that is the short plate. And then for F, that would be the brisket, just to ensure that you know what all the cuts of beef are. Next question is worth 4 marks, and it says, explain the scientific principles underlying pressure cooking as a method of cooking. So you're basically going to be explaining what pressure cooking is and how it works. So, as a response, you could say that pressure cookers work by increasing the atmospheric pressure inside the cooking vessel. This pressure raises the boiling point of water, which allows the food to cook quicker or faster. When the liquid, oftentimes the liquid used is water, so when the liquid is heated inside the pressure cooker, it produces steam. The trapped steam builds up pressure, creating a sealed environment. This pressure forces the boiling point of water to rise, allowing for efficient cooking. Final question, outline 2 steps involved in each of the following stages of preparing a beef stew, or some people may know it as stewed beef. So during pre-preparation, the 2 steps that I would have listed here is to trim and cut the beef, and this is because you want to ensure that any excess fat from the beef is trimmed off to prevent the stew from becoming overly greasy. And then the second one during pre-preparation would be to marinate the beef. So you'd want to combine all your ingredients for the marinade. Then you'd want to add that to the trimmed beef. And then you'd allow it to marinate. And as you know, marinating adds flavor and tenderizes the meat. The second step is cooking. So first off, you want to brown the meat or sear the beef. So you want to brown the beef cubes in batches to ensure that they are browned on all sides. Browning the meat will add flavor and it will add color to the meat. And then the second one is to add liquid and aromatics. So you can add the liquid by first deglazing the cooking vessel, and then you want to allow the liquid to come to a boil. Then you would reduce the heat and allow it to simmer until the meat is tender. The final step is service and garnishing. So for this one, you would serve with a suitable accompaniment. So once the stewed beef is prepared, you can serve that with a side of maybe rice or mashed potatoes or even bread. And then for garnish, you can garnish the beef stew with fresh herbs such as parsley or thyme, or even tomato rose if you want to add color to the dish. And that is the end of the 2023 paper. I hope you found this video useful. Feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe.